Good evening. We're on the air again with another edition of Pachios on the News. Kind of a newsworthy week. So we've got two experts here with us, two people that are well known to most of you, probably all of you in this audience. To my right, Bill Nemitz, the famous former columnist for the Portland newspaper.
How about formerly famous?
Formerly famous. Okay, and Tony Payne, who is at one time the executive director of the Maine Republican Party. He has a political newsletter. I've known him for years. He's been an insurance executive, Republican political operative. That's not a bad word. Operative.
No, operative's good.
Operative's fine. And me, a has-been. So the three of us are here to comment on the monumental aspects of this election. Incredible and very interesting for people who pay attention to politics, and I'm sure interesting to you all. I think I might first begin by asking you each a simple question. What do you think happened?
That's the question everybody's asking right now.
Yeah.
I think, I'll tell you what happened by virtue of something that happened to me over the weekend. My wife and I went down to Cape Cod to visit some family on Saturday, and we're driving through Massachusetts, and we started noticing it. You took the expressway through Boston, just south of Boston. Every overpass was crammed with mostly young white men with flags, big American flags, Trump flags, lining the bridges and, chanting, fists clenched. Not once, not twice, not 5 times. Every time we went under a bridge, it seemed. And I know this was Massachusetts,
Yeah.
And Massachusetts, it's 800,000 votes Harris won by. But I said to my wife, if this is happening in Massachusetts right now, imagine what's happening in some of the swing states, certainly in red America. There's a real fervor out there. So I think that segment of the population, there are a lot of variables, a lot of moving parts here, but that segment is the one that I think really brought Trump home to victory.
What segment?
The young white men. Mm-hmm. And the irony that I see there is that working class men, I should say too. And the irony there is that you can go back not too far in history, and that very demographic, young working white men, were the Democrats' bread and butter. And now they're their worst nightmare. So there you go. But I think that's what's really changed.
Tony, what do you think?
I think the Harris campaign made a calculated decision, and it was wrong. And the calculated decision was democracy is being threatened, and so are women's reproductive rights. And we're going to pound that because we think that 50% of the population is going to care about it, and they're going to vote their health. And from the standpoint of democracy, those who are caring and watching are going to worry about Donald Trump. And the grocery bill and the gas bill won and pushed all of those votes into consideration. And what you saw was, particularly with women, and they're the ones that were a huge surprise to me, that they voted their weekly shopping budget over their reproductive rights.
So they don't care. You think the voters don't care about some of the issues that Harris was talking about, or care much, or at least 51% of them don't care.
Many. And in this case, enough did not care. They were more concerned with hearing the big lie, which was, and here's one of my favorite analogies about this election. The arsonist, Donald Trump, screamed fire after he set the fire, and he flamed the fire. He blew on it, he poured gasoline on it, and then he stepped up and said, I'm the only person here who can put it out. And the populace said, Thank God someone's in charge. He can do it. And as long as he kept on throwing out the lie and could answer the question of how do you fix the problem, that's his method of not only, and this is where I'm most concerned, is not only in terms of how he communicates, but how he will govern. He will create problems to be solved that he is confident in.
So this is a methodology, I assume I know both you guys read books. This is a political methodology that has worked in many places in the world, in world history.
And is working around the world right now. I mean, this is what's happening in this country is by no means happening in a vacuum. If you look around toward just where the global shift is taking place, it's toward this more authoritarian, top-down kind of leadership style.
But there's something more here. I agree with you two guys that his methodology, he's probably proud of the word demagogue, I don't know, but he's a very successful demagogue, and not the first in world history, and won't be the last, although there are very few that are as good at demagoguery as he is, unusually good. But the Democrats have a problem because some of this is on the Democrats. So let me ask you a couple of things. How important do you think immigration and the border issues were?
I think they were huge in terms of the Trump vote in motivating. I think the immigration and the economy were clearly the two drivers of this election from an issues standpoint. And I think that, there were times when Trump hammered on that inaccurately and in an inflammatory way, you might say. But the fact is it's on people's minds, and clearly that's something people want resolved. I think there are a lot of repercussions of that come to fruition down the road if we start having, mass deportations and that kind of thing. That's by no means going to be a waltz in the park, economically for the country and socially at the same time. So, but I think it was huge. I think it was a big driver.
And I think it was another of the big lies. I mean, when you take a look at what he was pounding on day in, day out, we have rapists coming in over the border.
Right.
Well, he happens to be one, but that's
Right.
beside the point. And you've got, people eating pets in Ohio. That it was a manufactured issue, but it was, as is part of the playbook for authoritarians, there's somebody who's coming here to get and eat your lunch.
The boogeyman.
The boogeyman is coming. And the issue, to me, has been the issue of scarcity and abundance. And Trump knows how to play the scarcity card like nobody. The pie is this big and it's getting smaller. And if you're not getting what you deserve, somebody else is.
Yeah. Or the other way around. If somebody is getting something, you're going to get less.
You're not going to get it.
Yeah.
You're not going to get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned deportations, and I pulled up a New York Times piece that appeared 2 days after Joe Biden was inaugurated president. And it's titled, 3 million people were deported under Obama. What will Biden do about it? And it says that that Hispanics around the country viewed Biden as the deportation king, kicking everybody out of the country. So it was, the left looked down on him. I had a woman on this show. I shouldn't digress too much. I have a tendency to do that. But I had a woman on this show 2 months ago who is, I guess, a socialist. I think she would call herself a democratic socialist. I don't know what the democratic has to do with it. Nothing. I think it just looks good. But in any event, she said she would never vote for Obama. She didn't vote for Obama. She would never vote for Obama. She would never vote for Kamala Harris. She's a lefty. So, but Obama was disliked by many on the left because he was, let's face it, a moderate, even though some of my friends who are on the far right watching this show would say Obama is a Bolshevik, a communist, and like I love Trump. He says a Bolshevik, a communist, and a fascist, all in one person. Mm-hmm. But in any event, it was a problem, and Biden seemed to be affected by that. I think those on the left were saying to him, "You're not going to behave like Obama, we hope." And I think Biden must have listened because he didn't do a damn thing about the border.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything until it was late, too late.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had the bill.
But it was late.
It was late, but it was there. And I was musing to myself today now that, Trump basically torpedoed that with the Republicans in the Senate and made sure it didn't pass because, as has been widely reported, he wanted to use it as a campaign bludgeon, which he did. It will be very interesting to see what happens now if there is a final, or not final, at least some kind of resolution of the border issue, and to hold it up to that bill and see how much they resemble each other. Because I have a feeling there are going to be some very striking similarities. Whereas it was a threat to him before, now using that same construct can be a useful tool to him going forward.
And he had bipartisan support.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it was a bipartisan bill. It would be interesting now. There's 5 or 6 million undocumented immigrants in the United States today. That's one figure I've heard. That bipartisan bill was not designed to throw them all out because it had Republican support and Democrat support. And for business people who have the ear of Republicans, this is a big issue because if you deport all of the illegals in the United States, a lot of American business people are going to go out of business because they can't
Jobs
get
will
the
go
people to do the work. So
look at the labor market now.
Yeah.
It's already, look at the strain it's under already.
Yeah.
And
So I think that there will be some Republican members of the House and Senate, some, not many, but enough, who will say to Trump, look, we're for this, we're going to help you, but you can't, you have to have a system where you don't throw them all out.
Yeah. Well, logistically, it's a great rally line. It's a great thing to, get the signs waving. But it's just from a logistical standpoint, undertaking an operation like that.
Which cost billions of dollars.
My goodness.
But remember,
the
Obama,
upheaval would be enormous.
Obama deported 3 million.
Right.
That's a lot of people. 3 million sent back to their country.
So, if you talk about immigration and the workforce, think about all the crops, if planted, are going to rot in the field because they won't be harvested. And what happens at the grocery store?
The price of food, right?
We're going to see, if he follows through on this, we're going to see prices in the grocery store just absolutely skyrocket.
And what was one of the biggest things driving voter dissatisfaction to people who supported Trump? Grocery prices.
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So
one of many ways it can come back to bite them.
yeah, I've always thought that times have changed in the immigration issue. When my father came to this country as a 9-year-old with his parents from the southern mountains of Greece in 1914, all immigrants were undocumented. All you had to do was to show up at shipside with a ticket and state whether you had tuberculosis or another contagious disease. When you got to the United States, to Ellis Island, two things were required. One, you had to have an address where you were going in the United States. And the other thing is you had to open up your mouth for the doctor, say they check you out, they look into your eyes, the flashlight to see whether they had yellow in them or so forth, and that was it. There were no visas, there was no papers. But times have changed dramatically, and I looked this up today. This really amazed me. In the 1920s, this unlimited immigration, this swath of hundreds of thousands from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe, mostly Jews from Eastern Europe, came to the United States in a 30 or 35-year period. And people felt overwhelmed. They're taking our jobs. Get them out of here. We don't want them. They don't look like us, or whatever. Same stuff, xenophobia. But the population of the world was 2 billion people in 1924. The population of the world today is 8 billion, 4 times as many human beings on Earth. And the other thing is, they're more mobile. They can move from place to place. This problem is not an American problem. This is a world problem.
You want to throw climate change into that too, and really complicate it, because they're not only are they more mobile, but more and more, as we look ahead to the next 30 to 50 years, more and more human environments are going to become less and less hospitable for human life, and more people, less space.
Sub-Saharan Africa, the diaspora already in Uganda, Rwanda, all those countries right south of the Sahara are desperate to leave, and in large part because they are under despotic governments and their environment has burned up.
Famine.
Yeah.
So in this country, in 1924, when this immigration was such a big issue and they passed an act kind of shutting off immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe, there were only 115 million people living in this country. Today, there are almost 350 million people living in the country. So 3 times as many. And so we have to do something different than we did when my dad came. It has to be different because these people are mobile. There's just too many of them. And the big problem is that the United States remains as the place of opportunity in the world, the place where everybody wants to come. And the Russians don't have this problem. They don't have it. So it has to change. And Biden didn't change it.
Harold, think about this too, though. I mean, right here in our backyard, Maine has a population deficit. We have more deaths than births. We need to replenish the workforce. And that's not dissimilar to a lot of the Northeast and the Rust Belt. We don't have the population because white middle-class people are not having the number of children.
But that should be part of the plan of an immigration bill. I mean, this is part of designing an immigration bill that makes sense for our times. But I'll just say, the Biden administration didn't do that.
No.
They didn't. Joe Biden kind of ignored the problem. One of the biggest problems we have, he kind of ignored it. So some of this, a lot of this, Democrats bring on themselves.
But you don't demonize people. You cannot demonize people who are trying to make their lives better.
Well, that's a different story. I'm talking about a bill and to bring order out of chaos. Trump is calling them thieves and sexual predators
and what the Democrats could have,
horrible things.
The Democrats could have done a better job, I think, redefining them not as a threat, but as an asset, as you point, Tony. We've heard a lot of that in Maine. When arguments on both sides of the aisle have been made for, let's look at immigration as a source of replenishment economically for Maine. But I haven't heard a lot of that in this campaign. That whole issue, what they can bring. I mean, there've been some, when Harris talks about her own heritage and things, it comes up, but not in a way that could even begin to budge where immigration sits on the emotional spectrum for the electorate right now. And that is that it's something to be feared, it's something that is a threat.
And something you can throw gasoline on.
Exactly, something very flammable. Right.
But I think the Democrats have plenty of, responsibility for this failure. And I'm not talking, you're talking about Trump demonizing people. No, I don't demonize it, but there's only so many you can. And what we should be doing is getting people that we need in our workforce. And that should be part of the redesign process. But there is no redesign process.
Right.
And of course, you're right. There was going to be an attempt to redesign the process, and Trump said, don't do it. We need to keep this as an issue, which is just a horrible thing.
Cynical.
But most people, apparently 51% of the people they kind of like it.
Well, as you said, it's one of, I think it's one of this, ironically, it's been one of this country's biggest blessings and simultaneously, perennially one of its biggest fears.
Right.
At the same time.
So do you think, let me ask you a couple other questions in line with this. Do you think that the Republicans in the Trump campaign did a good job of throwing all Democrats, Kamala Harris and everybody else, in the same pot of far left radicals, that kind of labeling them as, you got in a way that made people fear the left, those who weren't reading for themselves and just listening to Trump said. And I use as an example, Black Lives Matter. That was a movement that started out with very, very good intentions and was very legitimate. But I think it was taken, my opinion, taken too far by the left and too far by people who wanted to profit from this movement and went too far to the left. So those who weren't black resented it. They said, well, then they started this foolishness of white lives matter too, which is part of their resentment. But there is a part of this was reaction against what they perceive as radical left politics.
Well, when you have groups, and the Democrats have lots of groups on lots of issues, it's very easy to let them define the Democratic Party. And it's what I mean, in congregate. I wouldn't say just Black Lives Matter or just this or that group, but if you look at them, if you're looking at them from an opposition standpoint in aggregate, and you want to, and they all, for various reasons, strike people as being far to the left, as you described, Harold, then it's not easy to throw that cloak over the entire party. And I think that's, from the point of view of people looking in at the Democratic Party, that's the perception they have, that it's basically a conglomeration of a special interest that has lost its focus of what was its original base. And that, as I said earlier, that was working class America. And they lost them.
It's a great analogy. The Democratic Party is like a Jeep. It's a collection of parts flying in close formation. And in this instance, they don't have a defining brand that they can speak to. But I think, and this, we'll see what happens over the course of the next 4 years, Democratic labor, if they're organized, and they are still coming up short, which they will under Trump, they are going to be able to coalesce and say, what happened to the working wage that we were promised?
Right.
Where is the equity? Why does at least 30% of the world's wealth is controlled by the top 15%?
The 1%. 1%.
So where's mine?
Yeah.
And if they don't get a good answer to that, this may be a one-term juggernaut.
Well, that may be, but Tony, this isn't the first circus. This is the second one. So remember, Trump had 2 years, first 2 years when he was first elected, 2017, 2018, where he had the Senate and the House. They controlled everything. So where were the solutions? The only solution was for guys like me to lower my taxes. That's, I was the one who benefited.
And lots of investigations.
And lots of investigations.
A lot of political
Yeah.
theater.
Yeah. So,
And, oh, by the way, he got a court. He got a
Oh,
perfectly,
that's true.
he got a perfectly bought and paid for
Yeah,
court.
yeah.
yeah, that's true.
Which, just as a footnote,
Yeah.
you think the courts, the judiciary, was being steered right during that term, without some of the checks and balances that you referred to earlier. That's going to be one branch of government that is going to be changed in a even more profound way.
Right.
Well, we're
than it
going to
has
get to
now.
that the absence of checks and balances, and what things might look like in the next 4 years in a minute. I just want to add a couple, just stick with this one thing about the Democrats and the left and the influence of the left. Of course, the Republicans got the same thing because they have kind of middle of the road Republicans and they have far right Republicans. So they got their own coalitions. There are many people I know who always vote for the Republicans because they think the Democrats are going to come and take their money. These are wealthy people I know. So they were always going to vote for, so they voted for Trump, I'm sure. You got people that vote for Trump because they have single issue, anti-abortion. Who are they going to vote for? You have people that vote for Trump because, well, as I said to a class I taught a couple of weeks ago, not all Republicans, friends, are racist. Far from it. Most Republicans are not racist. But you can be certain of one thing. Every racist will vote for Trump. Every last one of them. Mm-hmm. So it's, you know, they have their own coalition of people who like the Klan and people who hate the Klan, but like lower taxes. I think all political parties, we only got two of them and they're pretty broad. I like that. But I wanted to actually go back one more time to this thing about how the Democrats have been defined and how the left has kind of been the model for defining the Democrats. People think of the squad when they think of the Democrats. 4 people, a couple of them have been defeated, I think.
But that's just the point, is the disproportionate voice of a very small group on both ends of the spectrum.
Right.
And they therefore define what the party looks like.
But that hasn't hurt Trump. The Marjorie Taylor Greens didn't hurt. That didn't stop voters from voting for Republicans.
No, I would say it's fundamentally changed the Republican Party. I mean, you know, and I know, we all know there are many Republicans out there who, there might be a lot of Democrats who are distressed today, Election Day, with the outcome. There are a lot of Republicans out there who have been very distressed quietly, maybe not so quietly, for a long time, at what has happened to their party.
Very good point. This is not the Republican Party that I knew.
Yeah.
I would actually, when I first registered to vote, I registered as a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Cape Elizabeth, and 95% of the people were Republicans.
It did make you move to South Portland if you changed.
But now 95.
Out you go.
But now 95% of the people in Cape Elizabeth are Democrats.
Yeah, there you go. That's true. Yeah, that's right.
But you're still a gated community, so.
But these two things, that I think the Democrats fell into traps. There was this movement to decriminalize illegal immigration. Well, if it's illegal, why? What are you talking about decriminalizing? And there was a lot of decriminalizing this and decriminalizing that. And sometimes it makes sense to decriminalize something, but it seems to me there was a lot of too much decriminalizing and defund the police. Now, I don't know many Democrats who favored defund the police.
No, that's the point. It was it came to define them, but most
there weren't
Democrats
any around that wanted to defund the police.
None.
But that was, again, the megaphone effect, where, and this, of course, grew up around the George Floyd, whole George Floyd movement, and others, where it's kind of a hijacking, in a way, of apparatus. And if you scream the loudest, then not only is that how you become to be defined broadly, but it's also how more importantly, what your opposition uses to define you. And there's no rejoinder for that, because that's in fact what your people are saying.
Yeah. I want to ask you guys about something that a very, very seasoned politician said to me very recently when telling me that thought Trump might win. And this seasoned politician said, we've proven that a black person can get elected. We haven't proven yet that a woman can get elected president, but very few of us doubt a woman can get elected president because over half the voters are women. But black woman, both black and a woman, there are people who just on that basis would say, no, I can't vote.
A bridge too far.
A bridge too far. You think there's anything to that?
Oh, you can find people, I'm sure, and I think that a lot of there are some reports that I'm hearing now coming out of the Latin community and black communities that I don't know how much of it is race, how much of it is the fact that Kamala Harris was a woman. But there does seem to be, kind of maybe a double whammy effect there with some people. But they're not, and it's not just we're not just talking the traditional, Ku Klux Klan type person. We're talking about people who perhaps come from very patriarchal cultures and are having trouble wrapping their heads around the idea of a woman running things still.
Yeah, there's always has been and always will be prejudice among the human species. Always. You're never going to get rid of that. When people say there is no more race problem, I listen to that and I say, these people think there is no more human problem, apparently. Human beings have been cured of all of their deficiencies. So, talk about where we're headed. And I'll begin this discussion by saying something that you two guys might not agree with, but I'm rationalizing a little, so you can take that into account. We've had a lot of disruptive events in American political history. We've had disruptive elections. We have never, ever installed as president somebody who says the things that Donald Trump says, ever. I mean, he said the other day that the woman the Congress lady who Cheney, she should have 9 guns pointing at her. I mean, horrible stuff. So we've never had that before, but we've had a lot of disruption. We've had a lot of bad presidents, and our democracy has survived through the most incredible challenges, including a civil war. And you remember, nothing's more disruptive than this. When Lincoln was elected, the states in the South started seceding right away because of Abraham Lincoln. And not long, shortly after his inauguration, they went to war. The South went to war, firing on Fort Sumter. So that's pretty rough stuff. Your country breaks apart. The Union comes apart. So I'm not sure that democracy is going to end because of Donald Trump. I am positive that he doesn't give a damn about democracy because he only gives a damn about himself and personal power. But I think my rationalization, we're going to survive it fine.
One would hope, I mean, all you can do is hope. I agree. I think, it's a funny thing about the presidential cycles, because as you go into an election cycle, you think, didn't we just have an election? But when you finish an election, like you just did, you think, oh my God, 4 years.
Here we go again.
But it's not, I mean, look back on your own life, look back on all the presidents who you've witnessed. It's not an eternity. It's not all that long a time. You throw in an unfriendly midterm and it becomes even shorter in terms of, long-lasting impact it can have. So I agree that it's going to take more than that to, destroy the democracy. That said, I think there's a big difference between what's happening in this country now versus what happened in the Civil War. There's some parallels geographically maybe and economically, I suppose, but the tribalism in this country right now is, I think it's mostly economic, but it also extends into the informational spheres. It extends into where we get where we obtain our information, levels of education. All these things are combining, I think, to create a really complicated mixture in this country. I mean, the Civil War, maybe I'm from all these 100 plus years out, I'm looking back on it and it was pretty simple. It was about slavery, fundamentally.
Not fundamentally, it was totally about slavery.
But this is different. Why is this half of America and this half of America at each other's throats the way they are right now? Mm-hmm. And so I guess I feel like the democracy, before we talk about the democracy, we have to talk about what's happening to our society, what's happening to our culture, and how we as a people are progressing, because I think we're going like this. Half is progressing out in this direction, half's progressing out in that direction, and never the two shall see the world the same.
And that's helpful to some politicians.
Yes, but I think I think it's that long term, I think that does threaten the democracy.
And what also threatens the democracy is the channels of communication. I am convinced that the Fox News network, which is improperly labeled, it is Fox Views or Fox Views, but it is not news. But they have reinforced and amplified the divisions that let Trump become Trump. My wife reminded me, by the way, that she said, by the way, there's also the entertainment industry. They created Donald Trump.
Don't let them off the hook.
Exactly. They created Donald Trump into some kind of an executive who was successful. That said, though, I truly think that we have a serious discussion to have around communications and media, because the dominance of how thought becomes edict has just been overwhelming when you factor in Trump, and I'm sorry, in Fox. You can't have Hannity and company and those guys spewing the same falsehoods day in and day out. Just as Trump has said, there's a fire, there's a fire, right. There's a fire, and only I can fix it. Those are the demagogues of Fox News as well, and CNN, and MSNBC.
And don't forget X, formerly known as Twitter.
X, the money that seems to be associated with it.
The cables are old hat compared to what's happening on these social media platforms. And now look at Elon Musk. God knows what position he's going to hold in the administration.
Influence.
Yeah. So I mean,
the richest man is going to have a lot of influence.
Exactly.
Smart guy. I said, well, why is this guy in the beginning? Why is he doing everything he can possibly for Trump? And I figured it out last night. He's a very smart guy. He had a feeling, and he knows that Trump will be in his pocket.
Right.
Transactional.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally.
Which is the defining, I think if there's a defining question for this whole election, it was what's in it for me. I think that's what motivated most people.
Yeah. If you read mid-20th century history, which most of us do, the key to Mussolini and Hitler's popularity was media. In those days, we called it propaganda because they were able to do it. The Nazi Party and the Fascist Party in Italy were able to do it through their own sources. But then, when they got control of the government, they used the government as an instrument to influence people with propaganda. And that made it, the historians, have analyzed all of this. That made the difference. Influencing people through propaganda. And it works. And you're right, but I don't know what we have freedom of the press. So what can you do about it? Nothing, I don't think.
And you haven't even brought up artificial intelligence.
Right.
That
scares me.
I know. I mean, again, the comparisons, theoretically, the comparisons are valid with what happened in the early 20th century. But the vehicles by which those things are accomplished are light years beyond what those were, and therefore their ability to not only influence change, but immediately influence change, turn things on a dime.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that scares me the most going forward, is that genie, you can just see it going out of the bottle right now.
Yeah.
And it ain't going back in.
A very good friend of mine, he's a very bright guy, Harvard Business School, the whole 9 yards, tech company. And he said, if I were involved in politics today, I'd get a couple of good programmers, and I would employ AI and ChatGPT, and I would basically say, we have the ability to have an audience of one. So tailored based on your Facebook profile, your posts on Twitter, your LinkedIn, where you're showing up in people's networking. Mm-hmm. And now I know exactly who you are, and I'm going to play and pander to you. We're almost there. But as he pointed out, he said you could do that with 2 good programmers.
Sure. Well, TikTok is doing that right now. I mean, you watch TikTok enough, well, the algorithm's constantly being updated.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a never-ending spool of them feeding you more and more and more of what they know will catch your interest.
Right.
And that's the Chinese. just
as
an aside.
That's right. Just a few hundred million who are very good at this.
Right.
So what's now, again, looking at the next 4 years, Trump has been indicted for lying about the confidential secret documents he had. He said he turned them all back, and that was a lie. He didn't. He's been indicted. He's been indicted for stoking an insurrection, for creating an environment where people could get ginned up and go and attack the Capitol and break down the doors and break the windows in the Capitol of the United States. And then when it was ongoing, he was in the White House and refused to stop until 2.5 hours later, when his own children were pleading with him. So what's going to happen? Is he accountable? I mean,
no.
Everybody was accountable. Even John Gotti, the Teflon Don, was ultimately accountable. Is this guy accountable?
I don't think there will be any. I think the federal cases are going to go away faster than you can blink. I think Jack Smith is going to be fired summarily. The only sideshow, I guess, is going to be the New York State case, the felony convictions that he's facing right now. Inevitably, you're the lawyer, Harold, but I would think that would have to find its way to the Supreme Court, don't you think? Oh, yeah. Before he went to jail on a state felony, or even they pass sentence. Yeah. And so, I think that if you look at all the legal cases that were constructed against him, I can't really think of one that's going to survive this right now.
Yet, they all have merit.
Yes, that's right.
They are. We do. There are laws. I mean, people say he's been unfairly accused of this. Well, these were indictments. Grand jury indicted him. To be sure, not everybody gets indicted by a grand jury is found guilty. But the wonderful thing is, most politicians are like Menendez. Menendez said, I can't wait to get to trial to prove that I'm innocent.
Right.
Not Trump. He has never denied anything that was offered as sworn evidence in the January 6 hearings. Never said, he or nobody else has ever said that's not true. So it's probably true. He's never denied anything he's been accused of in these indictments. It's always, they're weaponizing the justice system to get me. They're afraid of me. They're doing this or that. But never, I didn't do it. Never, not once. I'm going to say this to folks. If you find that I'm wrong on this, send me an email or something. I don't believe that Trump has ever denied that he did it, the specifics he's accused of doing. So, but he, unlike John Gotti, he's going to escape. He is the only man in my memory, in all of history, to not be accountable for anything he does, and he knows it. He says he could go on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and his followers would never desert him. Is that correct or incorrect?
It's correct because he has a Supreme Court that has essentially ratified that observation. As long as it's in performance of his duties, well, if you're the elected president, where do you parse that? What is your official duty?
Well, the parsing was to occur in the trial.
Before or after?
Yeah, the Supreme Court sent it back to the trial court, and it told the trial court, parse.
Right.
Which
they did.
No, they haven't.
I thought they did.
No, the prosecutor.
I thought they
the
did.
prosecutor filed his motion saying, "Here's what I recommend is."
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah. The prosecutor has
right,
said,
right.
but the defense hasn't
Oh,
done
okay,
it yet.
okay, I see. Okay,
And so look, the other thing about whether this is a weaponizing the justice system. How do you weaponize the justice system when you have juries, the non-political juries, and you have to get, in a crime, unanimity on the facts, what facts they find, and what law is applied to it. And the judge instructs on that. Many of these judges are Trump-appointed judges. They give the instructions. How can it be weaponized? I'm a great believer in the system of justice. I'm a lawyer. I think the lawyers really stand between us and the failure of democracy.
Except the Justice Department decides what is brought into court in the first place.
They decide whether to go to the grand jury
Right.
in the first place.
Whether to charge.
Whether to charge. But what I'm saying is, I'm talking about the Trump defenders, many of whom are watching this program, who say, he didn't do anything wrong. They've weaponized the system, the justice system. That's not true. In this country, the defendant is judged to be innocent, assumed to be innocent. And not only that, but has a right to trial by jury, has the right to put in their own facts, has a right to undermine the government's case, has a right to appeal, has a right to a unanimous jury. So all of these rights to protect the accused, how do you politically weaponize all of those levels of the justice system? You can't.
It'd be a heck of a conspiracy.
It would be a heck of a conspiracy. So anyway, I think what's going to happen here is what you said. It's just going to be, he will go through life, 80 some odd years, unaccountable for any behavior. He can
Above
do what
the
he
law.
wants.
Above the law.
Above the law. So do you think that, what do you think will rein him in this time? This 4 years?
I'm having a hard time trying to identify anything that will
Well,
rein
last
him in.
time we had a lot of public servants appointed by him, people in the White House counsel, even Attorney General Barr at a certain point.
Right.
You had all of these people, Republican appointees, who reined him in.
And right now there are lists being prepared by the Heritage Foundation and various other, even further to the right, groups that are basically doing that vetting, and they're looking for a lot less resistance, I guess is the best way
They're
to put it.
looking for loyalists.
Yes, exactly. And so I don't think that the guardrails, as we mentioned earlier, are either going to be much lower or non-existent.
And the guardrail that he will be most concerned about are the 2026 elections. If he loses the House and or the Senate, that's the guardrail, and that's the ballot box, and that's the voters and people who are watching tonight.
It's where the ship turns.
Well,
again.
there's a guardrail. So what about the House? Do we know? We don't even know who's going to control
No,
it.
at this point we
This
don't.
point.
Right, even here in Maine. I mean, it looks like Jared Golden has claimed
Yes.
victory,
Yeah.
and I don't believe.
There'll be a recount, but it's likely he's going to win.
Right, but that's going to take time.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's playing out in dozens of races all over the country that are very close right now. We're not. The one thing about this election we won't know for a matter of days, I think, is going to be the composition of the House.
Is that a guardrail if the Democrats take the House?
It is. I mean, any kind of pushback is I think an important thing. The majorities, whatever the majority is, it's going to be so slim in terms of it might be an effective majority procedurally. I'm not sure it's going to be one legislatively. I don't think anything's really going to pass, especially in a split Congress. But there are certain when the fire alarm's going off, there are certain monkey wrenches that if they don't have a hose, they can throw a monkey wrench into it and stop it.
So, anyway, I think you're right. There'll be the criminal trials are going away. It is amazing. He's a pretty lucky guy. Born to an enormously rich father, grew up in enormous wealth, was staked by his father in business.
Was coached by
a very shrewd lawyer.
there you go.
By a very shrewd lawyer, told him never admit anything.
Right.
Deny everything.
Deny.
Deny. And a very unpleasant guy that guy was too. But anyway, he's lucky.
Yeah.
I don't know any bad luck the guy's ever had. I mean, his indictments, he created them. He did the deeds. So I got to say something. That maybe God is shining on him.
Oh, boy.
Maybe they're right.
Oh, boy.
Maybe all these people in these
Cue the choir music.
Tabernacle.
maybe they're right that God has specially appointed him, because otherwise he might have had a little bad luck in his life.
Maybe it ain't over till it's over.
That's what we keep thinking, but
One more angle.
yeah.
He's not well.
Right. Good point.
And he is timing out. There's a guy who just got elected vice president. That's frightening.
That's the guy to
That
watch.
doesn't frighten me.
Oh, it terrifies me.
I know, it terrifies a lot of people.
Why doesn't J.D. Vance terrify you?
Because I think the difference between him and Trump is,
You mean he's an amateur?
no, highly intelligent.
That's the problem.
No, that's what everybody says. That's the problem. I think he's highly intelligent, well-educated, and I think he would aim to distinguish himself in ways that Trump doesn't. And there's no evidence that Vance is a lawbreaker.
No.
That's
That's
important.
fair.
But apparently that doesn't matter, Harold.
Right.
You can do anything and
right.
get away with
Yeah.
it.
He can break the law.
And not be held accountable.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I'm not a fan of Vance, but I'm not.
But you make a good point, Tony, because we did all see it, and maybe it's anybody. How old is Trump?
Trump is
78. Yeah,
78.
78. He's tired. I mean, this was a long campaign, but there were moments like the famous dancing moment, and those episodes late in the campaign, where the same thing that drove Joe Biden out of this race is still there.
Right.
You know something? It is. But he's a lot sharper than Joe Biden.
Now.
Donald Trump is a lot sharper
What I'm wondering
than
is
Joe
what
Biden.
what Donald Trump. I would
But
agree.
here's the difference.
What's he going to be 2 years from now?
But I'll tell you, you're right about that. And I'm old, I can speak to those things. But the difference is that Democrats drove Biden out of the race. They did not want him to be president because they thought he was unfit. You cannot find a Republican in America with any ambition
That's right.
to be elected to office or re-elected to office who will ever do anything to cross Donald Trump. That's the difference.
And that, Harold, is why I was one of the co-chairs of Republicans for Harris.
You're in a
There
rare
was
group.
no courage in the Republican Party's elective slate
Right.
who dared stand up and speak truth.
But Tony, you
Good for you.
know that the most important thing for all politicians is election, and the second rule is never to forget the first rule, which that is the most. So no Republican apparently can get elected to office if Donald Trump is against them
Right now.
Right now.
right now, and now he's even more powerful. He's the most powerful Republican ever in the history of our country. The voters made him powerful. They want him to be powerful. They want him to have these powers. They want him to be unaccountable.
And what if they don't get the results they want?
Well, that's 4 years from now.
Or 2 years from now.
Or
It could
2
be
years
2
from
years
now.
from now.
Yeah.
And, my point is this is going to be a honeymoon for the ages. Second honeymoon. But,
I think one result
but,
we want,
but I think it's going to wear off.
the one thing they want is to stop the lefties.
Right.
That's one of the objectives. Stop the lefties. And the lefties don't have much power in the Democratic Party, interestingly enough. They might someday. They want to, but right now, they don't have much power.
I think I would just tweak that a little bit to say that their mantra right now is to protect their turf. I think
like
that's
all
what they want to do.
politicians.
They're trying to protect what they have.
Here, the music starts, we're out of time. Thank you very much, both of you guys, for coming.
It's been great. Thanks, Harold.
Yeah, this is a good discussion. I enjoyed this. Yeah. So.